Hey, it's Wisconsin Shoe Guy, and thank you for tuning in. This is a shoe battle for the Foster and Sons Wheatley versus the Crockett and Jones Durham. Both bring a lot of unique things to the battle, but they're both pebble grain, Scotch grain, split toe derbies, and so there's a lot of similarities on them. And I thought it would be a good thing to compare two very fine English brands.
Hey everybody, Wisconsin Shoe Guy here. Today we're going to do a shoe battle, and what we wanted to do is really focus in on two pairs of shoes today, trying to keep it very simple. They're very, very similar in style, and they are the Crockett and Jones Durham, okay, which is a split toe, and the Foster and Sons Wheatley, which is also a split toe. So different kinds of split toes. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how that works today. And then we'll talk a little bit about the other components of this as well. So excited to get going. Here we go. So what makes a split toe unique? What makes it cool? What do I look for in a split toe? The first thing I look for is the toe shape itself. I like the split toes to be distinctive, okay? And what do I mean by that? Some of them are reversed, some of them meaning that the seam is on the inside, some of them have basically no seam. I've got a pair of suede Carlos Santos that you can barely see the seam at all. It almost looks like it's just an apron shoe. I prefer the piece here, that's called the Norwegian split toe, where this is hand sewn, okay? And I do prefer that. There's a couple of different kinds. There's a French kind that has like a really little oval here and then has a long piece here. Usually it's outside. I have a pair of Paolo Scafora that's like that. And then I have and then there are some where it actually joins together in the seam. And that would be like this one. And so what Foster and Sons did here is they created this connection here of the multiple pieces of leather, and they did it in a different way. Now, sometimes this is not smooth as a transition, and it's actually like a layer that's on top, and that is considered an Algonquin toe, especially if this part here is long, and that piece is on top there like that. That is sometimes it's machine stitched, so it's hard to tell. Looking at the stitching on this, it looks like it's probably done by hand, just because it's not like super fine. But I really can't tell because the folks at Foster and Son are are just really good at what they do, and it's hard to know exactly whether or not that was it could have been done by hand, and it could look like a machine stitch, or vice versa. So, but anyway, so what is unique about these type of shoes? These are what would fall into the category of country shoes, and you can see that I like to have a shine on the shoes regardless of the style. But the pebble grain, or this is really like a Scotch grain, is very rough on these. So this is a great shoe to wear when you're out hiking, even when you're just doing work in the yard, because scuffs and things like that are not going to show on this shoe hardly at all because of this grain. So it's really well preferred for that, and even mud doesn't really show as much on these shoes as it will on some others. So that is something that is similar in both. You can see the grain on this is very thick, and but if you look at the patterns compared to each other, I would say that the thickness of the pattern is probably more pronounced on the Foster and Son than it is on the Crockett and Jones here. Now, let's look at the actual shape of the toe. And you'll notice that the Crockett and Jones toe is a little bit more of a rise, and less elongated. And then of course the apron on the split toe is a lot further down the toe as well. So the overall look to the Foster and Sons is just a lot longer of a shoe. So now if you've got size 6 feet or something like that, you want it to look a little bit longer. If you have size 10 feet in UK like I do, or an 11 US, it's less of a concern. So, and if you've got, size 16 or something like that, you probably don't want it to look as long. So just the nature of it. Now, this is a single sole, whereas the Crockett and Jones is a double sole. You'll notice that the double sole on the Crockett and Jones is brown as well. So that's a big difference. Now you'll notice that Crockett and Jones has what they call a storm welt, or a split reverse welt. That makes it look a little bit more country. Again, that's this shoe here. And what that is that instead of the welt going just underneath the shoe, underneath the footbed, it actually wraps around on the outside here, and creates this lifted welt. Now, there's a school of thought that this makes it more waterproof. That's why they called it a storm welt. And that's not to be confused. There's storm welts that are going on by certain brands that have nothing to do with this particular shape. The technical term, I believe, is split reverse welt. So that does make a difference as well. You can see the sole stitching really on both shoes. They do a nice job with it. But having that extra layer of sole does make it makes the shoe a little bit higher, a little bit more casual, although they're both very casual. But it also is another layer that can wear down before the shoe is ruined. So not a bad thing. Now I do know a lot of guys who complain that double-soled shoes just feel a lot stiffer. And maybe I like my shoes stiff, but that has never been a problem for me. So looking at the soles, these are Day-Night soles. Okay, and it actually says Day-Night here. That's the brand. It's a British brand. So some brands will use this directly. Others will make their own. Crockett and Jones makes their own. Or if they don't make their own, they might actually license it from Day-Night. But if you look at the actual dimensions and design of the shoe, it's pretty much identical. Now, take a look at the stitch density between the two, and you will see that Crockett and Jones is significantly more. The Crockett and Jones is also embedded in a groove, where the Foster and Sons is not. Here, it looks like it was not in a groove, but up here, it looks like it is. So when I've been on tours of factories where they're doing the sole stitching, most of the time in rubber soles or Day-Night soles, they don't put a groove in, but they make the tension high enough so that it basically creates the groove on the fly. So that may be what happened with both of them as far as that goes. I don't know. So let's take a look at the stitch density here to see how this is. And so if I look at this on the sole, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches per centimeter on the Crockett and Jones, and on here, we'll just line it up here for the 3 here. There's 1, 2, almost 2 3/4, 2.5. So even if we're generous, we'll call it 3. So that's 3. So 3 versus 4 stitch per centimeter. That's a pretty big difference. Now let's take a look at the upper and where that stitch density is. And let's look at they both have heel caps. So let's look at the heel cap here in order to be able to do the count. So we're just looking right there. So if we look between 5 and 6, that is, it's hard to tell. From that angle. So I'm just going to look at it here. The double row stitch just makes it hard to distinguish, but I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6. Now I'm going to look on here. Now it is difficult to see it because of the pebble grain. I'll take a picture here with a high definition camera as well, so you can check my math. But if I'm looking here, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5. So 5 stitches per centimeter on the Foster and Sons, 6 on the Crockett and Jones. So Crockett and Jones is living up to their reputation, not surprising. Now, if you look at the hand sewn piece, you know, that's usually going to be different. And so you'd be looking at the number of stitches in here in this groove. Okay, so you can see them there. Again, we're just going to look at it compared to that. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's 4. I'm going to just look at it here. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to say 4.5. Okay, 4.5. Now we look at this one. This is much less because it looks like it's really spread out. It looks like 3. Now let me look at it on the outside. Now, the thing that you got to keep in mind with stitch density is that sometimes the makers actually want the stitch density to be less because they're looking for that style. Okay, so the trick is to figure out what is a constructive stitch versus a design stitch. So I'll give you an example. Like these stitches right here that kind of look like bluchers. Sometimes those stitches are just pure decorative because it's not actually attaching anything on the shoe, and so the derby closure is actually just attached to the main part of the well, it's not the vamp, but it's the body of the shoe. So and that really is going to depend on the shoe. Now I talked about it being a hidden welt here versus a storm welt. Okay, a single sole versus a double sole. But there is one other significant difference in the design of these shoes, and I think it's a really interesting one. So if we look at this shoe, this is one piece of leather all the way across here, and they got the other piece, which is the tongue and the vamp, okay, or apron, and then they have a heel cap, which is 1. Okay. When you look at the Crockett and Jones, there's one side of the heel cap, there's the other side of the heel cap, there's the derby piece, which is here, and then there's the front quarter on both sides, and then you also have the apron, and the apron connects to the tongue. Okay, so this piece here makes this a derby versus this I would call a blucher because it's a different, it's one piece instead of 2. Okay, so there's a lot of different definitions on blucher, and usually it's supposed to be that this piece is sewn on. And as I said, this looks like it's more decorative, but the fact that it doesn't have that little curve there and that extra piece of leather, to me, that is a pretty big distinction. And for lack of a better word, that's what I'm going to call it. So if you guys know the official term, feel free to throw it into the comments. Really appreciate it. So what makes the shoe better though? Okay, we've already established the Crockett & Jones has a higher stitch density. If you look at the lining on this, I always think the lining is important because it really illustrates how comfortable the shoe is going to be. This is really super soft. One of the things I love about Crockett & Jones is that the linings are super soft. And I'm no expert at shoe construction, but it almost seems like they're a high quality leather. Now, when I feel the inside of the Foster & Sons, I feel the same thing, okay? It's very, very soft. Now, what's also very clear is if you look at this line here, compared to here, I'm going to say the lining on this is remarkably thinner. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look here. You can see this piece of leather is thicker, and then they have a midsection piece here as well. And that's common, I've understood from the guys who are really involved in the making, having that other layer there as a support. Now here it's going to be the heel counter, but up forward it's going to be different. But along the edge, they do that. Now, in some shoes, they actually do that with a midsection between the lining and the outer or the upper. They'll actually have something that will have a little tubing on the outside that's decorative, okay? And they call it piping. In these, they have something there. It's not really decorative. It's not really functional. It's just another layer in there. So, but anyway, I would say that the leather on this is thicker and softer. Although the lining here is quite soft. It's a little bit different. Now, I'm no expert, right? It could be full grain. It could be top grain. It's definitely not genuine leather on the inside because it's not wrinkled or anything. It's really good feeling leather. So that's that. So now the pebble grain is a corrected grain. All pebble grain is, and it is really quite interesting. And I did some burnishing here, so I've got some color variation, but most of that is just stuff that I did. And I did a different color variation when I polished the two different shoes. This is using a mid brown as a burnish, and this is using a dark brown as a burnish. So you can see the toes are a little bit different. If you look at the upper up here, you can see that the color is very similar. You can also see when I was talking about piping before, see how there's that little black area in there? That would be piping. And they have black along the line here as well. Where here it's more of a neutral color in between. So anyway, in terms of value, both of the shoes are quite expensive. Crockett & Jones run around $500-600. These Foster & Sons, which by the way are branded on the inside Henry Maxwell, which is a bespoke store inside inside Foster & Sons. They share an address, they share a factory, and they both do some ready to wear. And but the Henry Maxwell is more along the lines of a country shoe. So this kind of fits that bill. So it's part of the logo for Foster & Sons, so I'm not even distinguishing them. And I bought it on the Foster & Sons website because Henry Maxwell doesn't have an online store. But I'm going to say that this is probably list price close to $800. So if you have $800 versus $600, it's a bit more, quite a bit more. Okay, but I think I like having the one piece here better. I think that the elongation on the toe is nicer. However, I prefer split toes with this kind of joining, or a fancier joining. There's some that are look like little railroad tracks that are pretty cool. I do like the reverse toe here. I think that that's really classy. I do like the double sole better, and I also find it really cool that they have their brand on the sole versus Day-Night. Nothing wrong with Day-Night. Alan Edmonds uses Day-Night, and Day-Night is a very famous brand. But I just feel like the idea that Crockett and Jones has their own name on the soles is a little bit classier, in my opinion, for what it's worth, which I know is not much. Now, if you look at the waist of the shoes, and those of you who watch the channel know that I like a narrow-waisted shoe. The Foster & Son has quite a bit of a narrower waist. So I would say that looking at the two shoes, the Foster & Son is a bit dressier. And I will wear these with suits. I wear linen suits during the summer. I might wear tweed or flannel suits during the winter. I will definitely wear these with them because they're fun, and I own a lot of shoes and I like wearing different shoes with them. If I was going to a very formal event or something like that and I was looking at dark shoes, I would probably not wear pebble green, okay? I would wear smooth leather. But for most of today's business environment, nobody cares. They're not going to look at it and go, "You're wearing country shoes." It's not really a big issue. So anyway, so I'm going to, so obviously there are a lot of things for the Crockett and Jones that I prefer, and there are many things on the Foster and Sons that I prefer. So I am going to declare this a draw because there are many things that I like better on each shoe. And if I were to weigh it heavily, the price of this would probably bring it down a bit because it's 25% more money. And this one has the higher stitch density, so I'm going to call it a greater quality construction. But stylistically, I like the apron better. And I like the fact that it has a double sole better. So, but both are great additions to my wardrobe. I'm very happy to have both. And that is a shoe battle for Scotch grain or pebble grain, whichever term you prefer, split toe derbies, and two different, pretty different styles that happen to be in the same color. So this is Wisconsin Shoe Guy, and that's what I've got for today. I hope you found it interesting. If you have questions, feel free to shoot me a chat, and really interested in your feedback on how it went today. Thank you. Bye.